Miss Fisher's class. My name is Carolyn Samoes. Welcome back from spring break. I do apologize that unfortunately you are the only class that I have not met in person yet, but I'm looking forward and I'm optimistic to being able to do so in a couple of weeks. But for the time being, this is going to be our classroom setting. Before we get started on our discussion today, what I will have you guys do is write me an email response, and as we go through the video, I will let you know what I would like for you to respond to after you get a chance to watch and review the video. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to send me a blurb, sentence or two of anything that you know of that relates to music. So any musical facts, any prior knowledge that you have, just so that I have a general sense of where you all are at with your musical knowledge. So the first thing we're going to cover for the week is instrument families. So there are 4 types of instrument families. First one we're going to discuss is the strings family. Strings. The second one, percussion. Third, brass. And fourth, woodwind. We'll get up a little closer so you can read that. Strings, percussion, brass, and woodwind. All right, so what we will do is we'll name some instruments that fall under each of the categories, and I will have you respond by adding 2 examples of each instrument family that we did not cover on our board. So in the strings family, we have the violin, we have the cello, we have the viola, and we have, let's do one more, we'll do the guitar. So in your response email, you can either send it to me as a video so that I can start to know your faces and names, or you can send this as a written response. So you're going to be filling in the blanks, or any uncovered string instruments. And we're going to go on to percussion, drums. So drums is a very broad example. There's lots of different types of drums. We'll add, let's see, drums, the xylophone. Any of these, if there's any instrument on here that you have not heard of or are not familiar with, we are going to cover a little bit more into depth as to what those instruments are. Other instruments, other percussion instruments, the piano. Now the piano is a very unique instrument because it actually falls under 2 categories. So as I mentioned, it does fall under percussion, but it also falls under the strings, and I will further explain as to why it falls under both of those when we cover the characteristics of each of the families. Okay, so you're going to build off of this, and you're going to give me 2 other examples of percussion instruments. And we're going to move over to brass. So some examples of brass instruments. One that stands out is the trumpet. Fun fact, my husband is a professional trumpet player. He actually has a doctorate in trumpet. Another brass instrument is the French horn. And I'm going to put one more on here. The tuba is another example of a brass instrument. I'll leave you up to filling in two more of those for me. And the woodwind instruments. So woodwind, the saxophone falls under the woodwind category. The flute also falls under the woodwind category. And the bassoon falls under the woodwind category. So I'm going to come up a little closer just so you can read those easier. So under strings we have violin, cello, viola, and guitar. Percussion we have drums, xylophone, piano. Brass we have trumpet, French horn, and tuba. And woodwind we have saxophone, flute, and bassoon. So for all four of these categories, you're going to give me 2 instruments in addition, so you should be listing 8 other instruments. Okay, so now what makes a string instrument a string instrument? So a couple of characteristics that define that family. One, it has strings, so that's how the sound is created, through strings. For example, the guitar. So you have strings on the guitar, and that's what creates the pitch of that instrument. Another characteristic of the string family, most instruments are typically made of wood. They can also be made of other synthetic materials, but wood is the standard material for a string instrument. Some other characteristics of the string family are the way that you play that instrument. So there are 3 ways that you can play a string instrument. You can either pluck the string to get that sound. You can also strum. So the difference in plucking and strumming, plucking you pull individual strings, so that creates more of a melodic sound. When you strum, you're playing on multiple strings, so you're creating harmonies or many different sounds at the same time. And you can also we covered that. So we have plucking, strumming, and the last way to play a string instrument is bowing. So the violin, you would require a bow as a supplemental part of the violin, and you play the bow across the strings. So again, pluck, strum, and bow are the 3 ways that you can play a string instrument. We're going to hop on over to the percussion family. So drums, xylophone, piano. So the characteristics of that instrument family are that you strike the instrument. So if let's say I had a tambourine in my hand, you would strike the instrument to create that sound. With xylophone, instead of hitting it with your hands, you would use what we call a mallet. So you would use sticks to play. Percussion, you strike the instrument. And typically it has a more rhythmic feature or function, with the exception of the xylophone or the piano, where you have melody with it rather than a percussive sound. So going back to why the piano has the characteristics of a string and a percussion instrument. So when you play the piano, you're striking the key, so you push down, which is why it falls under the percussion family. But if you open up the piano, and this does not apply to a digital piano since those are synthetically produced, but if you are using a standard upright, if you open up the piano, you'll see a whole bunch of strings inside of it. So there's a hammer, so you push the key, the hammer strikes the string, and then the string vibrates. So with that technicality, it falls under both of the string and percussion family. So next is the brass family. We have brass and woodwind, which both fall under the broad term of wind instruments because you are using your air to play both of those types of instruments. But what makes the two separate from each other? With brass instruments, let's state the obvious, they're made out of brass. But what distinguishes the two families, with brass, you use valves to play, so the keys, they're closed, they aren't open. So you push down on valves. And the other characteristic that separates brass instrument is that you use your lips to buzz. So you create, I can't do it, but you create a buzzing sound with your lips, and you don't actually put the mouthpiece inside of your mouth. It goes on the outside of your lips. So brass, the three big characteristics: it's made of brass, you buzz your lips to create a sound, and you push down on valves rather than keys. So if we go over to the woodwind section, a saxophone is made out of a metallic brass material, but you do not buzz your lips to play, and the keys are open, so you don't play on valves. So that's why, if you were curious as to why the saxophone is under the woodwind family, even though it's not a woodwind instrument, that is why. So with woodwinds in general, you push down on keys, which are typically open, so they're, if you were to blow just right, if you weren't using a mouthpiece, you would actually get air through those keys because they're open. You use a mouthpiece, but typically, besides, we're going to exempt the flute because it's a little bit different, you place the mouthpiece inside of your mouth. So it goes here, and you also need a supplemental piece called a reed. So the reed attaches to the mouthpiece, and it vibrates alongside of the mouthpiece. Flute is the only exception because you blow air across. So imagine if you were blowing across a bottle. That's the way that you would play. I definitely recommend Googling the images just so that you have an image of what these all look like.